Is it on? Hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm an alcoholic and a member of the Board of Trustees of the Alano Society, Minneapolis, also known as 2218. Please stand and help me open with Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Welcome to 2218 Saturday Night Speaker Meeting. This is an open meeting and all are welcome. We feature members of recovery to share with us their experience, strength, and hope. For 78 years, 2218 has been a self-supporting home to recovery. Our main source of income is our membership. We encourage you to become a pledging member. Feel free to see me or Eric or anybody at the front desk after the meeting to learn more about the opportunity to pledge. The second way of 2218 is self-supporting is through our own contributions. Jean will pass the crate now, fill her up. Donations help to keep our lights on, heating and air conditioning, water, sewer, and maintaining the building, which was originally built in 1887, and we need to keep the doors open. Someone messed up with these things. Anyway, let's see. I'm going to change the pages here. We have some announcements coming up. We have the Ride for Recovery. Flyers are at the front desk, and it's on our Facebook page. Please friend our Facebook page, Alano Society Minneapolis. And that's June 26th, if I didn't say it. It's going to be a full day of stuff for everybody, including the motorcycle ride. But music all day long, food, silent auction, raffle of some really awesome items, and mansion tours. We're going to have mansion tours of the mansion. If you haven't toured the mansion yet, we started doing that. Then we have the Pat Cronin Birthday Bash, September 18, coming up too, and that's going to be a full day of some really interesting information about 2218 since we purchased it in 1942. I have asked Julie to come up and read the preamble.
Hi, I'm Julie, alcoholic. All right, the AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Thanks, Julie. I've asked Valencia to come up and read how it works. She's nervous. Clap for her.
Hi, I'm Valencia, alcoholic addict. How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way that we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have, are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these, we balked. We thought we could find an easier and softer way. But we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and through from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Keep reading. Yeah. Half measured availed us nothing. At the turning point, we asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. One, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanageable. Two, became to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Three, make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Four, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Five, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Six, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Seven, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Eight, made a list of all persons we have harmed and became willing to make amends to them. Nine, made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and that when we were wrong, properly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying for only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having a spiritual awakening. As a result of these steps, we try to carry the message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What in order? I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like the perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after clear three pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have revealed our alcoholism. C, that God could and would if he were sought.
So this comes to the fun part. I want to introduce our speaker for the night, Anne, who seems to be, I'll have a lot of friends here in the room. Clap if you know Anne. Wow. I've known Anne for, let's see, how many years? 12 years? About. We were both active in general service and then Gopher State Executive Committee. And uh, so I couldn't think of anybody better to speak for us tonight. And so I would like to welcome her up and have her share her experience, strength, and hope here with us.
Thanks, Annette. My name's Ann, and I'm an alcoholic. And it's by the grace of God, love and service to the fellowship, and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My last drink was November 7th, 1987, and I'm very grateful for that. 1987 was a kind of crappy year for me, but it got me in the rooms of AA. My home group is Design for Living. We meet on Thursday nights at 7 o'clock at the Coon Rapids United Methodist Church. If you're ever up that way looking for a meeting, swing by. We'd like to have you. It's a fun group. We do meet in person, masked up and everything like here. And normally I introduce myself with my last name, but because we're recorded and broadcast, I'm not going to do that at the public level. So that's why I don't do it for the people that are here that know me. I got to tell you, I'm kind of nervous tonight because it's been a while since I've spoke anywhere, and I think anybody that knows me knows I like to talk. So it's just been kind of weird, but I really, really am grateful to be able to do it tonight because it's been a long time since I've been here, actually, and just anywhere in general. And it's always an honor and a privilege to be asked to do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I really appreciate it. Like I said, my home group is that. My sobriety date gave that. I have a sponsor. She happens to be in the room. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I haven't seen you in a while, but we talk. I sponsor other women, and that's a big part of what keeps me sane and sober and active in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's important. And so I like to get that to the kind of the housekeeping stuff out of the way. Annette also mentioned that we knew each other from general service. Her and I served as the DCMs, the district committee members, for different districts at the same time. That's how we got to know each other. And Annette's very, very much involved in service, and I've always appreciated that about her. And when you meet people in service, you get to know them in a different way than you do when you're in your home group, let's say, and you do a lot of projects together, and you really, I really appreciate all the friendships that I've made over the years and on committees and all that other kind of stuff. So it's a lot of fun, and I miss it all. I really do miss it all. So hopefully we're going to get back in the right direction here soon, so that we get to start meeting together. And hopefully everybody knows that Gopher State got moved to Labor Day weekend. So check that out. That's going to be awesome since we missed it last year. But okay, a little bit about because I did drink a little bit before I came to AA. I'm not originally from Minnesota. I grew up in Iowa. Woo-hoo. Iowa, that's not what made me an alcoholic. Well, some people might say that. I wasn't born in Iowa. I was born in South Dakota, but I was only there for 3 days because I was born to an 18-year-old unwed mother who told everybody she was moving to California. And what she really did was go to South Dakota and stayed in a home for unwed mothers there. And so it was kind of a big deal. You know, back then it's not quite the same as it is now, but I did meet them eventually, and that's a whole another story, and a really cool part of my story, but it's a long story too, so we won't get too much into that. But I was only in South Dakota for 3 days, got sent to a foster home in Sioux City, Iowa, and was adopted by my parents at 10 days old. And, you know, in AA, you hear a lot of pretty tragic stories sometimes, and some really alcoholic homes and that kind of thing. And that was not my story. You know, God absolutely had a plan in my life, and He placed me on a small farm in Iowa so that I could do the least amount of damage, pretty much. My parents are some of the nicest. My dad's passed away now. The last 2 years ago, he passed away, but just the nicest family. They were very religious, very spiritual. They were responsible, hardworking, honest, you know, just all those really good qualities. And they tried to teach me those, and it just didn't stick. It just didn't stick. They were not alcoholic. Nobody I grew up with was alcoholic. And so I know that, you know, I came with they should have been given a big book when they got me, because it's like, here, this is what you're going to have to deal with for the next while. because I was restless, irritable, and discontent from the get-go. And if you ask my mother today, she will say that out of the 4 kids that they raised, I was the high-strung child. I was the she's too nice to say that I was a pain in her butt, but she will tell you that they got their money's worth when when they got me. And they treated me just like their other children. I never felt less than. I never felt different than. Not in regards to my being adopted, but I was a manipulative child. Even then, I used the fact that I was adopted to get my way, to punish. I would, you don't love me as much as your real kids, and did stuff like that to get my way. Um, the disease, it talks about it in the book, the disease of alcoholism centers in our mind, and it drives how I think and how I act. And that's why I haven't had a drink in a long time, but I need the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as much or more today than I did, because I got a whole lot more to lose today. I didn't think I had anything to lose back then. So growing up on a small farm in Iowa, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity to drink, but I took that opportunity as soon as I could. And that was when I was 12 years old. We were at a wedding for one of my cousins, and there was open bar and booze was all over the place and everybody was drinking, and I started drinking the way I ended drinking. I drank as much as I could, and I blacked out, and I don't really remember much of what went on, but I do remember just feeling this sense of ease and comfort that it talks about in the book, that I just I didn't know that I had a lot of thoughts going through my head all the time until I had alcohol, and that just calmed everything down. I was just able to kind of maneuver through social situations and all that, and I had no idea that that's what I was experiencing, but I know that today. So at 12, I did experience that physical allergy to alcohol that it talks about in our literature. That when I put a drink in me, it sets up a craving for more, and I just am going to keep going until I get shut off or cut off or whatever is going to happen. And that might be a day, it might be 3 days, a week. I have no idea what's going to happen once I put a drink in me. And at that age, my folks didn't have a lot of alcohol in the house, so there was no opportunity for that. And what I found was that if you have a lot of sore throats, it requires a lot of cough syrup. And so that was what I could get. And so I drank cough syrup for a couple of years. And that's nasty. Drinking cough syrup, it's nasty. But, it took the edge off of my life, of my 12-year-old life, and I look at kids that age today and I think, I can really see how screwed up that is. But at the time, I just had no idea. And I just did what made me feel good. And that was being under the influence of something as much as I could. And I didn't think that there was anything abnormal or wrong about that. It's just I did what felt good and what felt right. So I did that. When you're 14 in Iowa, you get your driver's permit. Can you imagine letting kids 14 years old driving around up here? No, not a lot of traffic in Iowa. So not where I grew up. There is cities and people who somebody asked me one time, I was like, do they have apartment buildings in Iowa? Yeah, they do. But I grew up in a very rural area, and my dad treated your permit like a license. And so just got the keys to the car at 14, and I was a liar from the get-go, and so we never went where we said we were going to go. And my parents, God love them, they came from really good families, very conservative, religious families, and they just had no idea what was out there. And so you could tell them, we're going for pizza, we're going to a movie. That was like our standard. And I don't think we ever did that. I have no idea. But so we would drive around, and at 14 years old, we were going to parties, and I lived just by the Minnesota border, and it was really easy for us to get alcohol in Minnesota compared to Iowa, because at that time they had state-run liquor stores and they were a lot harsher. But Minnesota, you could always, so we just hop over the border and go get some booze, and or we had older people. And I remember when I first came to AA, there was a lot of old men in AA at that time. There still are, and and I remember a few times, being younger in AA, and people making comments about, how do you know you're an alcoholic? You haven't drank enough, and that. Um, Everybody, it doesn't matter what age you are. If you're an alcoholic, you have a desire to stop drinking, you're welcome in the rooms of AA. And so some of that stuff you just gotta kind of file it in the trash can and just do what you know is right. If you have a problem, there's a solution here for you. Um, so at 14, I wrecked my first car, and that was my parents' car. And I would have told you when I came to AA, if you'd asked me, I'd have told you that I never affected anybody. I never hurt anybody. I never did anything except, I hurt myself. And that was totally delusional. I wrecked my I wrecked my mom and dad's car in a head-on collision, and that I would have told you that was not alcohol related, which was not true either. And I didn't even realize that till many years later, because I just lived in this delusion in my own little world, and I just saw what I saw, and it was very, very self-centered. I didn't, as a matter of fact, I was probably 10 years sober before somebody had asked me one time, like, how much did it cost your folks to have that accident, or did they have the insurance and all that? I'm like, it never crossed my mind to even think about that, how that would have affected them, because it never crossed my mind how I affected anybody. And so I did that, wrecked the car, and I'm not going to tell a whole big drunkalog, because it really, I drank, and I drank anytime that I could. And I did a lot of things that I was ashamed of, that I felt guilty about, that I didn't want to think about, and it became really crazy in my head. And like I got to the point where I couldn't feel, and um, so I would do things to try to feel something, which the, how I did this, don't ever do this, but I would drive down the road at 80 miles an hour with my eyes closed, and I would do it until I got scared and I'd open my eyes finally, and that was the only way that I could feel something. And I was doing that at like 15, 16 years old, and I was a very sick person, and I had no clue. I drank, every opportunity, like I said, and I'd go to parties and stuff. And out there was always parties out. I don't know about in the city because I didn't grow up here, but we had names for party places. There were, kegs wherever, out in cornfields and in woods and all that other stuff. And the cops would come, you'd take off running, and it was just that was just a normal thing. And another thing that I had done, that I didn't think of for many years, was I had left school and we would go to a party during the day, and my car broke down, and so I left it on the side of the road and went to a party. I probably didn't get home, I don't know, till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And my parents had gotten a call from the police at 2 o'clock in the morning, wondering where I was, because they had found my car and they had no idea. And I have kids. I would be frantic to wonder where my child was. And it never crossed my mind how I affected them, how much I created worry and fear for them. Like I mentioned, the disease of alcoholism centers in our mind. And I know one of the, I could tell you a lot of stories on how that manifested itself. But when I was 16, I diagnosed myself with a brain tumor. And what it really was a hangover. And I lived 15 miles from school, and I was running out to the bus that morning, and my head hurt just terrible, and I could feel this just stabbing pain in the back of my head, and I could feel this bump back there, and I thought maybe I'd fallen down the night before, but I couldn't remember doing that. And so the next logical step would be that I have a brain tumor, right? And so I have 15 miles to plan my funeral because I'm dying of this brain tumor. And the Knights of Columbus were at the funeral, you know, with the big feathered hats and the swords, and everybody was devastated and crying appropriately and mourning, you know. And I had this whole scene planned out about my funeral. And when it talks about in the big book about being in full flight from reality and outright mentally defective, that kind of reminds me of that line, because that's how I made decisions in life. Though it would come to my head, and it's true. And this this brain tumor got me a referral to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester. And like I said, I would have told you that my drinking never affected anybody. And I don't know how long it was from that referral to when I actually went up to Rochester. But I don't care if it was a day. My parents thought there was something seriously wrong, that I was potentially going to die from this brain tumor. And so my mom took me up there, met with the doctors, did all the tests, the scans, all that stuff. And the doctor sat down with us, and he's asking me some questions about this brain tumor that I could feel in the back of my head, because I could feel them just growing back there. And he said, "Do you worry about these bumps on the back of your head?" I said, "Yeah, because they're growing back there." And he said, "Well, do you touch them a lot?" I said, "Yeah, I do." Because they're right, you know, I could feel them like circling around. I can still, I can just like they're circling. And he goes, "Everybody has those bumps on the back of their head. Stop touching them." But I believed that I was dying from a brain tumor. And if you feel in the back of your head, everybody has those bumps on the back of their head. You don't have to go to the hospital or anything. Check them out. But that's how I made decisions, and that would explain how I ended up with my first husband. I met him at a party, and I didn't really care for him. Wasn't overly attracted to him at all. Thought he was kind of weird, and so I moved in with him. We've all done it, right? I mean, like, seriously, that's welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah, so I moved in with him, and he owned a bar at the time. I was 18. Yeah, that was pretty attractive. And so got married to him, even though I knew in the in the pit of my stomach, I knew that this was not going to go well. And it turned out not to go well. But we make a lot of bad decisions based on self. You know, I really thought that this was the right thing to do. He owned a business. He came from a family very similar to mine, and I thought this was the right thing to do. And there was no way that I would have been able to call that off, because I would have been mortified to tell anybody that I was changing my mind. So, you know, there was a big decision that I made based on self, and it placed me in a position to be hurt. And I placed myself there, as I did with most things that I did. And how I was looking mentally at that time, you know, alcoholism doesn't get better, it gets worse. And I was a daily drinker in high school. That didn't stop. When I got into my 20s, I got married when I was 20 years old. And, you know, it was a big deal being in a smaller area, owning the bar. And you kind of, I mean, it was kind of expected that you you lived the party life, and that was okay with me. And my husband liked it that I drank. He never questioned my drinking. He never, um, I was fun. I was not one of those crying, boohoo ones that you wanted to push out of the car. That was not me. I was, and I had a lot of disdain for people that couldn't drink like I did. And it was because I felt different being around people that didn't drink like me. And so that pretty much excluded anybody that I grew up with, anybody that I went to high school with. And when you're drinking the way I did, you drank with older people, and it was generally older men. And, we do a lot of things um, when we're self centered that bring about a lot of fear and shame and guilt and all that stuff. And it just creates more drinking. So when I got into this marriage, I thought, that'll, I should be happy. I should really be happy because I had a car and a house and money and all this stuff. And how I thought at that time was, I must be going crazy. And I didn't even know what that really meant or looked like, but that made sense that I was going crazy. And I couldn't tell anybody that because I was ashamed of that. I thought, I can't let anybody know. And I was terrified of anybody getting to know me or figuring me out because I just, if they knew what I was like, they wouldn't like me. And they would hold something over me. I was paranoid about that. Um, and my husband just kind of left me alone, basically. And I just did, and I used to do crazy stuff like steal from myself. I used to, we had money from the bar and we had a safe downstairs, and it was my money, but I'd go down there and I'd, like look around, steal my own money. We do crazy things that don't make any sense, but at the time they really did. And at that time I was full of fear. In the book it talks about these hideous four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. And that was my life the last probably couple years that I was drinking. And it was pretty much regularly I would drive to work, and I would fantasize about driving into oncoming traffic. I was doing that a lot. Um, I didn't want to die. I just didn't know how to live. I just couldn't live with how I thought, and I didn't know what was wrong. What came along with that husband was a friend of his, and he became one of my biggest drinking friends. And I could hang with him, and he could hang with me. And turns out, we're both alcoholics, so that worked out pretty good. But I thought that we had this connection because he was adopted as well. And I had no idea that I was alcoholic or he was alcoholic. But that turns out to be what was the attraction there, and not in a sexual way at all, but just he just was somebody that I felt like I knew. He knew me, and um, he would do crazy stuff when he drank, like he'd ride his motorcycle down the street and forget to put his feet down at the stoplights and punch brick walls, and he was hooking up with married women and all that stuff. And I would say, what are you doing? That's stupid. And one night at the bar we were sitting there, and I'm telling him he's stupid, and I'm punching him in the forehead. And then I would say something, and he'd go, well, that's stupid, and he'd punch me in the forehead. And people left us alone a lot. And I thought it was that they respected us, but it was that they thought we were crazy, and so they left us alone. Turns out that he 2 years before I got sober, he ended up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't know what AA was. I had never heard of it. I didn't know anything about any of it. And that might be because my mom, even now, she'll whisper, like they went to treatment. Like, they got cancer. But he went to AA, and he was really the best example of AA that I could have had, because what I saw was that he was going to this deal, he wasn't drinking, and he was happy. He seemed to be okay. And I never connected his drinking, or how he drank with my drinking. I just thought, good for you, like you need some help. You really, you really needed some help. And he never pushed it on me or anything like that. The last 6 months of my drinking got worse. Like I said, it gets worse, never better. And I became one of those women that cry all the time. And I would look for him no matter where he was. And I'd go to his work, I'd go to his house, I'd go wherever, and I was crying all the time. And I didn't know what was happening. And he finally asked me one night if I thought I had a drinking problem. And that had never crossed my mind, ever. And I said, I don't know. And he asked if I wanted to go to a meeting with him. And there, in a small town, I think there was only 2 meetings a week there. And I didn't even know that there was meetings other places. Like, I was pretty clueless. And he said, try not to drink before you go. So it was like, I think it was 2 days. So I was detoxing for a couple of days, and I walked up there. It was small town, Iowa. If you know what Northfield looks like, kind of looks like Northfield with the old buildings, and there's stuff up above Main Street. That's where the AA meeting was. Like, who puts AA meeting right on Main Street where everybody can see you? And I was absolutely mortified that anybody would know I was going to an AA meeting. Everybody knew me in town. I owned a bar. They all knew me. I knew all of them. And I didn't care if somebody saw my car outside the bar for 3 days, but I did not want them to see I was going to an AA meeting. And I walked up there, and thank God that he offered me the hand of AA, because I would have just drank myself to death, because I didn't have any idea what was going on with me. And I would love to say that, I walked into AA and did the steps and, did everything perfect and all was well, but that's totally not what happened, because I am selfish and self-centered, and that definitely is the root of my problem. And I did AA like I did life. I assess the situation, and I decide who I'm going to talk to and what I'm going to tell them, and I'm going to BS my way through. And that's how I did AA. When I got there, there was an old guy that came up to me and shook my hand, and he asked me if I was really looking for Alateen. And I had no idea what that was, but it pissed me off. I was like, Alateen, are you serious? Like, right now, I'm 22. I'm married, and he made it to my first 4-step though, so that's all good. He's good to go. But I know that he was being welcoming, and he thought he was being funny. And I am just overly sensitive to what people say. And he could have looked at me like that, and I would have had a resentment against him. It wouldn't have mattered. And I know that today because of the steps, that I am overly sensitive, and that is a handicap that I need to be rid of, because I just get my feelings hurt too much. I get embarrassed too much. I get resentful too much. And so I have to apply the steps to be able to survive my own thinking and get through life. But like I said, I did AA the way I did life. I sat there, and I was a pretty messed up person when I got to AA. I don't remember really the first couple of years going. I remember just barely a couple of things. I remember one thing that I remember, there was this guy showed up at a meeting, and he had 19 years of sobriety, and he had just come back from a relapse. And my first thought was, what a I'm not going to swear, but I thought, how stupid. And that was my attitude towards that. because I thought you just make this decision and you suck it up and you stop drinking. And I wanted to punish him because that's how I deal with. I'm a punisher, and it's like, how could you do that? Because I really believed that you just make this decision and you stop. And why would you drink again if you came to AA? I would be too embarrassed. That's that was my thinking, to let anybody know that you drank again. You told everybody you were quitting. What I didn't understand was that I don't have the ability to just make that decision. I cannot stay comfortably sober without a spiritual program of action. And I know that because I stayed sober for several years after I came to AA. And I did the steps off the wall. And if you do the steps off the wall, you get an off the wall program. I did, first step, okay, I can say I'm an alcoholic. Of course I can. You guys are saying it. I'm not going to say something different. But it didn't have any meaning to me. I didn't understand what that meant. Step 2 and 3, I lumped in with religion because I had grown up in a religious household, and so check, those are done. And that's not what any of that means. 4th step, that looked like a lot of work. I wasn't going to do that. 5th step, no, you don't admit to people anything like that. Crazy. 6 and 7 just kind of, aren't they kind of throwaway? Like, that's 11. I can do 11. My mom used to write prayers out on recipe cards and leave them on the table, and that's how we learned how to memorize these certain prayers. And so I got 11 just nailed. And 12, you give me your problems and I will fix them. That's how I looked at step 12. I became a lay therapist. Let me tell you what's wrong with your life and I'll tell you how to fix it. And I'll tell you, I can spot those people in AA because we're selfish, self-centered. And that's how I came in and I talked a good game because we're good. We're good at, we're the actor. We come in and, um, so there are people, if you're looking for a sponsor, ask them some questions. Have you done a 4-step written 4th step out of the big book? Does your sponsor have a sponsor? Tell me about your spiritual awakening. What was that like? What does your higher power look like to you? Ask some of those questions because some of them had people asked me those, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. And so there's some little tips for you. And if you don't have a sponsor, get one. Even if it's somebody that you don't, because it's like I always thought, well, you got to have, like this connection and you got to have everything is alike. You know what? You're alike because you're an alcoholic. Just get somebody and sit down and read the book together and take the action that it talks about. Because until I did that, I was running my life and I was running it into the ground. I told you that I worked the steps off the wall, and that did not change my mental situation. At several years sober, how that looked for me is I was picking up men in the stores in my mind and making them my husband for like a month because I couldn't live in reality. Everything was, when they talk about when you're doing the 4th step and it says fancied or real, there were things that I didn't know if it was real or not because I had lived in this fantasy world for so long. And things got worse because whether you're drinking or not, alcoholism is progressively worse. And I was starting to envision going into oncoming traffic again. I was having a harder time staying sober. I wanted to drink so bad I could have about killed somebody for it, but I didn't want to drink. And I came to that place where it talks about in the book that, that where you can't imagine living with it or without it. And that's a miserable place to be. And I ended up back in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the difference at that time was I was willing to do whatever it took. and I didn't know what that meant, but I wanted something to change so bad that I was willing to take suggestions. And what that meant was that I had to understand what alcoholism was. It was this physical allergy and this mental obsession. And that mental obsession is what had to be treated, that thinking, because I was not comfortably sober. The only time I ever was okay with alcohol was when I could just drink as much as I wanted. And just because you don't have a drink in you doesn't mean you're cured. Doesn't mean you're comfortably sober. And it was I don't ever want to feel like that again. And that's why I need to stay in the middle of AA. I need to one time she hates to hear this. But one time my sponsor gave me a medallion and she said, you know that Anne sponsors a lot of women because she is that sick. And that's the truth. If I didn't have people to work with, I wouldn't be here. Because I have to be able to get outside of myself and think about somebody else and try to help them so that I get to stay sane and sober here. And being involved in general service, being involved in committees, being involved in sponsorship, being sponsored, going to all that stuff. I need it all. I need you guys. I need AA. AA doesn't need me so much. You know, they were just fine before I showed up, and they will be just fine after I leave. I can't even hardly express how much my life has changed um, because of the 12 steps and the fellowship. And I know absolutely that God saved my life. I should have been dead by my own hands long ago. And God saved my life. And AA has shown me how to live my life. And you know, when it talks about it being a design for living that really works, and that when stuff is happening, when the chaos, because life happens. Like 4 years ago, my husband ended up in the hospital. Well, let me back up a little. I got divorced. That was from first husband, and met a guy that I didn't really think that I could be in relationships because I was too self-centered. And what happened with when you work the steps and you actually are trying to apply this in all your affairs, I didn't have selfish motive for being with him. And it's not like I'm the perfect wife, for sure. He's very patient a lot of times. But he's also in the program. He's been sober for 42 years. He got sober when he was 19 years old. If you're young and in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, you can have long-term sobriety. At 19, you can be sober. It doesn't matter how old you are. Not at all. And on the other flip side of that, it doesn't matter how old you are either. I've known people in their 70s come into AA for the first time, and the same thing applies. Get a sponsor, work the steps out of the book, and have a spiritual awakening that is sufficient to keep you sober. And when, 4 years ago, he ended up in the hospital with congestive heart failure. And you know, it's just life happens, you know, just because I thought that when you got sober, life was just going to be really good. Isn't that what they tell you? You know, the promises are happening and all that other stuff. Well, the promises do happen, but they're not like cash and prizes. It's that I'm able to show up for life and be a participant in my life. And I can be there for other people. And I couldn't do that before. I couldn't be here and now. And that's really what AA has done for me, is that I'm able to show up for people. And when he was in the hospital, AA showed up for me. And I was just so grateful that people came and saw us and asked what we needed. and they've just been there for us. And when my dad died 2 years ago, um, him and my mom lived down in Iowa, about 3 hours from here, and there were several carloads of people came down for his wake. And my family and my mother was blown away by Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember my mom said, "You have the nicest friends." Like, that's not me. I never had the nicest friends. I wasn't I wasn't the nicest friend. But people showed up for me. And that's what we do for each other. We show up for each other because we can. And it's what we do. We be of service to other people. And sometimes I have to, because the hard part for me is taking that and being the one who graciously accepts help, because that's not in my nature to do that. I want to be the helper, but sometimes you have to say thank you. Thank you for the help. And I've learned that through working the steps and working with sponsees and working with a sponsor. I mean, it goes both ways. I have to be able to accept help, and I have to be able to give help and be a servant. And that it's just amazing how that I just I can keep putting forth effort into service, and I get so much more back than I ever think that I've put into it. And through through living this life, today I have a husband that we like each other. And I really didn't think I was capable of being in a relationship. And we support each other. And it's not like we have the perfect relationship. He gets on my nerves, I get on his nerves. But at the end of the day, we respect each other, and we take care of each other. And I would say he takes care of me way better than I take care of him. And I'm very grateful for him. We have, I have a daughter from that first husband, and I have two little grandsons that I get to have a relationship with today. And I have a son. My husband now, him and I had a son together, and it's just been quite a life, And it's not like it wouldn't have been anything that I thought it was going to be, and I would have sold myself short. We just get these spiritual gifts that I wouldn't have had any idea were even a part of this thing. I'm grateful for so much stuff in my life, and it's a crazy deal. So I'm going to close with I like to usually read, and it kind of sums up. If you haven't read the stories in the back of the book, check them out. You'll see yourself in them. And this one is from The Keys to the Kingdom. And she writes, the last 15 years of my life, so I'm going to say the last 30 years of my life. The last 30 years of my life have been rich and meaningful. I have had my share of problems, heartaches, and disappointments, because that's life. But also I have known a great deal of joy and a peace that is the handmaiden of an inner freedom. I have a wealth of friends, and with my AA friends, an unusual quality of fellowship. For to these people I am truly related. First, through mutual pain and despair, and later through mutual objectives and newfound faith and hope. And as the years go by, working together, sharing our experiences with one another, and also sharing a mutual trust, understanding, and love, without strings, without obligation, we acquire relationships that are unique and priceless. There is no more aloneness with that awful ache so deep in the heart of every alcoholic that nothing before could ever reach it. That ache is gone and never need return again. Now there is a sense of belonging, of being wanted and needed and loved. In return for a bottle and a hangover, We have been given the keys of the kingdom. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Wow, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Anne. Thanks for sharing your story with us tonight. Everyone is welcome to remain after the meeting and thank Anne and visit with each other. And if we could help put the tables and chairs back to the way they were, that would be appreciative. And let's just help me close with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thanks, everybody, for coming.